A gay movie star gets married to save his public image and career. Sound familiar? Well, today we're talking about the book My Lucky Star, the new book by Joe Keenan. He was a writer and producer on Frasier for 7 years, and he's now executive producer of Out of Practice on CBS. He's got 5 Emmy Awards, and he's going to give us an insider's look into what's happening in the closet. Great to have you here today, Joe.
Very good to be here, Greg.
I just want to say I will never look at the Academy Awards and the Oscars quite the same way again after reading this book.
Well, then my work is done.
And when I hear that someone's gotten the Oscar or they're getting the Oscar, it gives it a whole new meaning.
Tread carefully, counselor. We don't want to give too much away right at the top of the interview.
That's
or
right.
At
Read
any
the
point
book
in the interview whatsoever.
You will never look at it quite the same. So, well, the thing is, this is not officially a tell-all book. It's a work of fiction.
No, it's a novel. It's a comic novel, a satirical romp through Hollywood.
But yet, it does seem to. There seems to be a bit of a ring of truth, or at least kind of what we hear or we suspect, or people. You know, you hear like, oh, so-and-so is just, you know, is it a charade or a public? And you do have some real actors in the novel, but yet even some of the fictional characters, there seem to be some references or maybe a compilation of real people. But how much of this is truth and how much is fiction? Is this completely made up, or is there something you observed?
Well, I think it's certainly completely made up. I invented everything, but you don't invent anything in fiction without making sure that what you're inventing has the ring of, if not truth, at least plausibility. And when I had the idea a long time ago to take the characters that I'd used in my first 2 books, Blue Heaven and Putting on the Ritz, and take them out to Hollywood, I thought, well, okay, they're in Hollywood, what are they doing and who are they getting mixed up at? I thought, well, you hear so many interesting stories about different stars, married or otherwise, who are rumored to be gay, and that sounds like an interesting kind of character to, you know, just take all of those rumors floating through the air and don't try to do a romantic, don't try to do, you know, a portrait of anybody, but just take that idea and see what kind of a character that idea leads to.
So what does that lead you to?
Well, it leads to a very funny character, because when you're writing comedy, there are certain elements of human nature, certain foibles that are inherently funny. Duplicity is funny, dishonesty is funny, pretending to be what you're not is funny. And somebody who is in that position, who has invested a lot in being something they're not and has made themselves very famous as a result, has a lot to lose. And when characters have a lot to lose, they do very interesting and very funny and very absurd things. And so that's the engine that gets your story going.
And again, in the background of all this, you do touch on the theme about who's in the closet, and that's used as the basis for blackmail and a lot of other things. But so you're saying it's not based on any particular movie star, it's more based on general things that you've heard. I hear the same
rumors that everybody hears, the same rumors that float through the air and that everybody gossips about at parties. And that was my entire research for this book, was gossiping at parties. And you say, well, I don't know if any of this is true about any of the people they're talking about, but it sure makes a delicious character, and it sure makes a fun story to imagine what would happen to such a person if they found themselves in a very sticky situation.
And photographed and a few other things, right?
Well, again, not to give too terribly much away. But the character's dilemma at the beginning of the book, that what begins his problem, and this is what brings our characters into him, is that he is a very large megastar. His name is Stephen Donato, and he is the son of an even bigger star, the legendary Diana Malenfant, who at 70 is a 2-time Oscar winner. And he has been famous literally since birth, and did his first movie with his mother when he was 10 years old. And they played a saloon singer and a waif in a movie called Sophie and Sam, and he was, not unlike Tatum O'Neal in her time, nominated for an Oscar for it, unlike his mother. And now, 25 years later, he is a huge, huge star, both in action films and in serious, high-minded Oscar-bait dramas. And he and his mother are preparing to co-star in a movie for the first time since he was 10 years old. At the same time as this is going on, the family gets terrible, terrible news, which is that the mother's sister, his aunt, a washed-up B-movie star of such old 50s noir films as Soiled, Brazen, and Shames for Rich Girls, is about to write her memoirs. And their mother and son are both terrified about what she will reveal, because she knows everything and has more than enough dynamite to blow the hinges off his closet. And that's where my characters find themselves entering these movie stars' lives.
Well, along the way, besides Heidi Fleiss is one person that comes to mind with this, and I'm just wondering, because one thing that you touch on is that the character ends up going to kind of high-end
yes,
brothel, as it were. And so you wonder if something like that, because again, I've heard...
Let's see what else we can give away, Greg. That doesn't happen until about 2/3 into the book.
Okay, I won't give away too much here. But again, you hear, I've heard stories, like I said. I've certainly never been invited, never been there. But you hear stories about places. I mean, have you heard that there are actual places? Are you basing this on a place like that?
No, I'm not basing it on anything whatsoever. I mean, I certainly knew of all the stories of Madame Alex and Heidi Fleiss and those characters, and there was a certain character in the book, and I thought, well, if I brought this character to Hollywood, that's probably what she'd be up to.
Of course. What else would they be up to?
It was in this character's nature, but again, that's something that's not revealed until a fairly late stage, a little past the middle of the book. And the one thing I do try to do is to set up a story in which surprises and twists occur with, I hope, pleasing regularity, and that the situation is always getting more perilous, more complex, and things are reversing, and the characters are just stepping on one landmine after another, and all of this hopefully not foreseen by the reader, at least if the reader has not seen the Gregory Mantell Show.
Well, believe me, there's still plenty that...
there's still plenty of surprises left after that point.
Yeah, and you do manage to get them in some interesting situations, to say the least. Well, let me ask you this. Again, especially now with, let's say, Brokeback Mountain up for Oscar and that sort of thing. This theme, and that's one reason I wanted to kind of go with this angle today, is just that, that it is a serious subject, or a true subject about not only in the largest... Well, first of all, I mean, Oprah just did a show called, My Husband is Gay, talking about guys who are married but secretly have relationships on the side. So it's certainly not just Hollywood. But you hear these things about Hollywood, and I will say that I do know of some people firsthand. I'm not going to name names or say anything, but I do know. For instance, well, I'll tell you. I've never read the novel, but I can think of a particular movie star who works out at a gym I belong to, who had just won an Oscar and showed up at the gym one day with his young male companion and had just been photographed by the National Enquirer up in the mountains with a male model. Was the talk of the gym that night. Everyone said, oh, so-and-so showed up at the gym. And so I actually knew he was taking a private class, and I knew the teacher, and I actually just stuck my head in and said, oh, hi, I didn't know you had a client. And I saw enough to convince me firsthand that this was more than just an
Did this actor take his mother to the Oscars by any chance?
I'll tell you during the commercial.
Taking your mother to the Oscars is like wearing a rainbow cummerbund, as far as
He may also take like night walks in parks, but that's another story. But I'll tell you.
The person to whom you are so elliptically alluding did not cross my mind in the course of composing this.
Okay, well, and again, but the reason I'm saying this is that after that, and that night at the gym, everyone was sharing stories about everything they had ever heard about everybody. And I'm not going to go into rumor and gossip. I'm just saying that I knew firsthand. I will say shortly after that, though, publicly, I heard this actor or his publicist swearing on the radio that he was not gay, that he was straight. And like I say, I saw with my own 2 eyes. And so, anyway, I mean, I know that, obviously people are out there doing that. It's an inherently comic
situation. When somebody is trying to pretend to be something that they're not, to me, that's fantastic fodder for comedy, because the person is setting themselves up for embarrassment, setting themselves up to land in an extraordinarily embarrassing situation.
And you kind of show.
And Stephen, in my book, lands in about as excruciatingly, potentially embarrassing a situation as any married megastar could possibly find himself in.
Right.
And I went through a lot of trouble to say, what is the most embarrassing thing you could possibly imagine happening to a star? I mean, what is so bad that if this got out, he would really just pretty well have to commit seppuku, because there'd be nothing left. He would be not a national, but a global punchline for the rest of his days.
Guy's mind works, yes. I will say, you came up with something, as I say, I'll never think of the Academy Awards ceremony the same way again. But on the other hand, let me say this. The feeling is people do this to save their career. So I mean, really, who are they hiding from? I mean, they're hiding from us, or hiding from you, is the audience, is who they're hiding from, because they feel that their careers are at stake, or their public image, or that's the end, or they're going down the drain.
Well, I think what they want when people who are very famous and gay or rumored to be gay hide themselves, what they are trying to preserve is the greatest possible level of star power, the greatest possible level of mass adulation and adoration. And these people know that if they come out, a fair amount of people will applaud their courage, and a not insubstantial portion of the audience is going to say, oh, well, in that case, I'm not your fan anymore. And this they cannot bear, and this is what keeps them in the closet.
Right. Well, and certainly
They do tend to come out much later, but after their star has fallen and their glory days are behind them, then it's a lot easier to say, yeah, well, what the hell? Yeah, I was
they
gay.
write their memoirs or something.
Yes.
And well, we'll be right back with Joe Keenan, author of My Lucky Star, right after this. We are back with Joe Keenan, author of My Lucky Star, today, talking about what's going on behind the scenes in Hollywood. So, well, again, with Brokeback Mountain out there, you know, one thing, again, on the one hand, a lot of people are, well, first of all, let me ask you this. Should people really talk about their private life publicly? I mean, I guess I'm more of a, what I would say, a Jacqueline Kennedy, as far as I don't necessarily feel that you should put everything out there publicly. And sometimes, straight or gay, I think people say, as a talk show host, I can say this, people say far too much on TV. Yeah, I'm always amazed when I look at Oprah and I see so-and-so sitting there saying, oh, you know, Brad left me, or, you know, whatever. And I'm thinking, whose business is it? It's your personal life. Why are they on public national television talking about this?
Well, it's certainly a question of context when you talk about people talking or not talking about their public lives. It was always, I think, you know, the stance of the right wing that if you're gay, we don't have to know about it. Well, how is it if I'm gay and I have a relationship, this is something that really should best be kept decorously to myself, whereas when you get married, you march down the aisle of a church and take pictures in the New York Times and do everything with as much fanfare as possible, and you have pictures of your wife and your kids all over your office, but the guy who has a picture of his boyfriend is kind of flaunting it, and can't you keep your so-called private life private? I mean, there's a hideous double standard there. There's a difference, however, between that, simply being open about who you are and your relationships and your nature, and inviting people into every, you know, unnecessarily, you know, tawdry or squeamish detail of your personal love life and your angst and your sex life that, you know, people really don't need to know.
Right, because I'll say, I mean, honestly, one of the most boring, now I guess some people love it and people do because they buy this stuff, but I've often said, I don't care who Jennifer Lopez is dating, I don't care who Britney Spears is dating, and thank God she's married, or, you know, I mean, but that's all people.
No, I don't take much interest in any of that myself.
You know?
Again,
I mean,
only to the extent that it's fodder
right.
for a comic situation, for a comic story, and then maybe you pay a little more attention because it will give you a good idea. But it's certainly in a culture as celebrity obsessed as ours is.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of fun to be made of people who capitalize on that kind of fame and who court that kind of fame and then have to deal with the repercussions of that kind of fame.
Yeah, and then usually complain. And again, a little more lenient on the talk show host because I understand why, as a journalist, I sort of subscribe to the philosophy that, you know, I can understand why the journalist will ask it, but whether or not the person should answer it, I'm not sure. But so you know, anyway, so in other words, I know why Oprah asks it. But I thought she was very clever on one episode once with Britney Spears, because Britney Spears had this thing about she was going to preserve her virginity until she got married. And then Oprah asked her, whose business is it? Do you think you should go out there talking about it? So I thought that was interesting that Oprah could ask her, but yet do it in the context of saying, you know, why are you talking about it? But it still allowed her to bring up the subject. And,
I think if you're Britney Spears and a virgin, this is a fact that requires some clarification.
Hey, maybe you have some details on that.
You can't rely upon people to intuit that fact about yourself if you're Britney.
But going back, though, more closer to the theme of this book, though, whatever anyone else may be saying out there, going with Brokeback Mountain out there, and again, it almost seems.
You keep mentioning Brokeback, but what do you think is the significance of Brokeback? Because I think there's a difference between actors playing gay characters and the country embracing gay stories and people being open. Well, the theme of the book, people's own sexuality and the extent to which they masquerade that and
exactly.
And
that's why I wanted to ask you, because on the one hand, as I say, Brokeback Mountain's out there, and it's interesting to see if that will change the public's, you know, if it'll suddenly become fashionable for the big stars who may have hesitated from playing gay characters, if they get the Oscar.
It has long been fashionable for big stars to play gay.
Right.
I mean,
well, certainly
so
many movies and TV shows these days. However, but you notice, okay, so it's everybody's playing this, and every time I watch a movie or TV show, there's always some gay angle. I mean, somebody's gay or somebody, but officially nobody's, you know what I mean? The characters are gay, but the actors are never gay. You know, they always go out of their way to say that they're, you know, publicly, nobody's gay.
Playing gay, for a long time there, it seemed how an actor demonstrated his bravery and his courageousness, which is not to denigrate a lot of really fantastic performances that straight actors have given in gay roles. Right. But I don't. You were asking if Brokeback Mountain will make it more fashionable, more acceptable for straight to play gay, because I think that's been the case for a long time.
Okay.
If the movie is going to change anything, I think it's going to change hearts and minds of the people who see it. That it is a love story so moving that you can't imagine straight audiences seeing that and thinking, damn, these guys really should have been allowed to live their lives the way they wanted to. It was a tragedy for them. It was a tragedy for the women they married. It was just a bad idea all around. And maybe a system that tells gay people to just, to just shut up about it, have their backstreet affairs, and marry nice women whose hearts will be broken is maybe, something that needs serious rethinking, and not just in the metropolitan areas where people haven't bothered to do that so much, but all over the country where that's been too sad and commonplace a fact of life.
Yep, because one thing Brokeback Mountain does, and your book does actually, the wife doesn't know, but she does. I mean, she's heard the same things everybody else has heard.
Stephen's wife, the phenomenally clueless and untalented Gina, has made a Faustian bargain, and that her relationship with Stephen does not seem, I think to the reader, or certainly to me who wrote it, nearly so much a love match as a shrewd career move on her part and on his.
Yep.
So, I mean, Gina knows which side her bread is buttered on, and even though she's a little too naive to really know that Stephen is gay, once that fact becomes clear, she doesn't run for the door.
She just gets kind of like a few presents to pacify her.
Oh, great. And, now we're giving away the epilogue.
Well, and I hate to say this, but I also think of Hillary Clinton in that situation, because no matter, that's a whole other subject, but I think she enjoyed being Mrs. President Clinton and liked living at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and then no matter what Bill Clinton had done, she was willing to look the other way because she liked living in the White House and wanted her political career. And the same thing with your character. She likes being the wife of the famous movie star, and she really, maybe if she had her druthers, she wishes he weren't doing it, but she's going to stay in the house and keep the name and the car and the house and everything else, so.
Well, she's too shrewd not to know that. She may like to believe that her life, a post-Stephen life, that her career and her luster would remain undimmed, but some small, shrewd core of common sense is aware that this is not the case.
Right. Whereas in Brokeback, of course, I mean, now this poor woman was not, or the women, I suppose, actually, they didn't have so much the fame and the money and stuff to make up for.
No, that was not. I mean, in comparing the two, the stories really couldn't be more different. I mean, Brokeback is a moving, romantic tragedy, and this book couldn't be lighter or funnier or sillier or more of a lark, more of a caper. But I mean, the wives in Brokeback aren't in it for for the connection, for what these husbands can give them. They're in there because they love these men.
Right.
And it's a love that can never be fully reciprocated, which is, again, the tragedy of the closet and what the movie thematically is about to me.
Well, so, there are also stories you hear about old Hollywood, and we're talking more about modern day Hollywood and various aspects of it, but you hear the same thing about the older days, and that it was probably worse back then. Do you think, I mean,
or better.
Or better. Oh, what do you mean by that? You want to tell me?
Well, just when there wasn't a press even suspecting such things were going on, it was easier to get away with them. That's what I'm suggesting, perhaps.
Well, okay, so did the press not suspect, or was it just something you didn't talk about, even at the press, where it was unmentionable? I mean, that sort of thing you mean, or?
Well, you think, I mean, of the rumored gay Hollywood relationships, the most famous, of course, is Cary Grant and Randolph Scott, who actually kept house. Wow. For quite a little while, and were photographed romping in the pool and in dressing gowns at the table. I mean, what stars could do that with a straight face today and not have the entire American populace say, "Oh, come on, who do you think you're kidding?" But back then, you were kidding everybody.
Yeah, and that's an interesting angle with the press, because I think sometimes today, in whatever way that they are kind of in on it, or people won't. I know of cases where magazines haven't published stories that they know or could have. Now, whether they felt they couldn't be, of course the other tactic people say is that they'll sue, but and maybe they felt they couldn't substantiate it or something. But I know some cases either that they felt, well, and who knows what the National Enquirer were like this, but you even hear sometimes that, what was it, this is more of a political thing, but then they claim that the Enquirer or somebody would sweep a story under the rug, well, maybe for political reasons and not so much sexuality in this case. But you hear things that either they think it may hurt their sales, anyway, sometimes they're willing to play along with the image as well, I guess I'm saying. So of course, then if it becomes big, then it helps sell the papers, so.
Well, they're very cautious, I would suppose, about litigation, and that if you really don't have the goods on somebody and can't back the story up, because they have been sued successfully for stories they've published.
And certain actors make it very clear that they will sue you if you say
anything. Indeed they do.
Which you kind of hit at in the book in a way where there's a question about what they can actually prove, and because if it's
Philip, when he goes to work for these stars, our heroes are forced to sign an ironclad confidentiality agreement that would could sue them into the ground for saying they drank milk out of the carton, let alone slept with boys.
And then it always comes down to, because if they've been having an affair with, someone who's for hire, then of course, what kind of witness does that person make? Because the first thing you say, well, why are you going to believe them? They're just a prostitute or whatever. So it's very easy
to. That's a cagey aspect of things that Stephen latches onto. That if you have a quick and dirty fling with a rent boy, somebody whose resume is a little long on fellatio is not going to be taken as seriously by the public as somebody else making the same allegations.
We will be right back with Joe Keenan, author of My Lucky Star, right after this. We are back with Joe Keenan, author of My Lucky Star, today talking about what's going on in Hollywood, what's really going on. But one other thing when I say about, how's the industry changing, or will things like Brokeback, or just the general, maybe more liberal attitude these days, I understand that even contracts, I think certainly for soap stars, for instance, there were morality clauses written in the contracts that something like good character or good morality, and so that if you kind of became if you got wrapped up in a scandal, if people started saying, oh, well, so-and-so.
What period are we talking about?
Fairly recently, in recent years, that you could actually be fired from the show because you got wrapped up in like a scandal. Concern. So it's kind of a veiled threat.
But would they regard coming out as a scandal? Or?
Basically, yeah. There was a thing that, from what I understand, I mean, I think, especially for the soap operas, that it was not cool to be gay on a soap opera.
That's news to me. That's not something I'd ever heard of.
And they've
certainly
even changed
not of recent
today,
vintage.
right? Because the rest of television has changed so much.
I know back in the 50s, those kind of things were.
No, it was actually, there were morality clauses in the contracts that said if you are, and it was, the reason I know is that someone I won't say his name now, but we may have on the show, and he's been public about it, was on The Young and the Restless and talked about what happened when he came out afterward. And, but yeah, there was kind of the, they had to make the public appearances and have the girlfriends and all that, and if you didn't keep up the image, your job was probably on the line. So hopefully that kind of thing.
But you prefer The Hung and the Restless.
Indeed, yeah. And, yeah, so what can I say? I mean, they were, I don't know, I just think it's unfortunate when something like that happens, that people have that kind of a threat hanging over their head.
When it's written into your contract, that's reprehensible.
These days, I hope that wouldn't hold up, just because, personally, I don't think it's anybody's business. But anyway, yeah. So hopefully
I can't imagine a clause like that holding up seriously today. I mean, scandal something that was a good deal more tawdry, I guess you can imagine. But for God's sakes, what is a scandal these days? What is that actual career-ending scandal?
I would say in America, there is no such thing as bad publicity. I mean, you can think of some of the cases like Martha Stewart and people who come out with their home videos. It helps their career. It launches their career in most cases. So like you said, yeah, I don't think there is such a thing.
Paris Hilton has sex on tape, and it leads to a network series deal. I mean, there is
there is no such thing as
refreshingly without shame in this decade.
Yeah, in American television, no such thing as bad publicity. All publicity is good publicity. So that's why there's no such thing as a bad interview, by the way, because even bad publicity is. So anyway, these final minutes, is there anything about this book, since I've taken you off on a wild tangent today, all over the bigger social themes, is there anything I'm missing about your book here you want to get out there?
Well, I guess I would just like to say that we've been so busy talking about the themes, particularly as it relates to sexuality in Hollywood and the Hollywood closet, that I'm not sure it's quite gotten across that the book is a very funny, satirical novel with great plot twists and turns along the way, and that it's a real romp, and it's a fun, breathless, satisfying comic read.
It is, and indeed, I mean, your comedy background from Frasier, you can tell you've obviously been doing a bit of writing in your time.
Yes, I spent 7 seasons on Frasier.
And you managed to work this book in between, right?
It took me about 9 years to finish the book, because on a TV schedule, you work from June through the end of March, and then you have editing and hiring and all of that. So you really only got 4 or 5 weeks a year tops in which you could turn your creative attention to something else. So it took a long time just working in dribs and drabs and on my vacations. Mm-hmm. I would really literally wrote about 2/3 of the book while on vacation out of town. Going to various islands and cities, and I just walk around all day with a notebook or a voice recorder and keep going on the book. So finally, mercifully, it was done.
What is different for you about the writing for the novel versus the TV show? Because, well, certainly the pace is a lot faster, where you're just, in effect, cranking it out because you got such a deadline pressure.
Well, that is, a deadline pressure is a huge difference between TV writing and novel writing, and if you're not you're seldom in a deadline situation with the book. I mean, I write my TV scripts until I'm out of time. I write my novels until they're finished. The other major difference between writing prose and writing anything dramatic is that when you write dramatically, you're really dealt with only the vocabulary of speech as we speak it. You're trying to capture the way people talk, whereas when you're writing prose, it's understood to be composed, and the entire thesaurus, the entire dictionary is at your disposal in describing things. So it's a much bigger palette that you have to work with in terms of the kinds of jokes you can write, the kind of descriptions you can do. I mean, you're doing it all. The novelist not only writes the characters, but you're giving the performances as well, and setting the scenes, and you're the set designer and everything.
All right, well, the book is My Lucky Star. This is Joe Keenan from Frasier and currently on Out of Practice on CBS, the executive producer. Thank you very much for being here today, Joe.
Thank you for having me.
Very funny book. As I say, you'll never look at the Academy Awards the same way again. And we'll leave it at that. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you next time. Yeah, I'm telling you, you have a twisted sense of humor there.